of the City Resilient Department of the Municipality of Milan. The City Resilient Department is the office responsible for the resilience strategy of the city, and it operates as part of a bigger department, which is the Environmental Transition Department. As I mentioned before, this event is part of the widest frame of the STEM in the City initiative, which is promoted by the Municipality of Milan. As you may know, STEM in the City aims to spread the culture of technical scientific education, and it tries to remove the gender stereotypes that distance girls from studying STEM subjects. Honoring this approach, today I am glad to present this all-female panel titled Meteorological Data for Sustainability, Support to Adaptation Strategy. And before going on with the presentation of the session and of the eminent speakers, I would like to give the virtual floor to Assessora Roberta Cocco, the Councillor for Digital Transformation and Citizen Services at the Municipality of Milan. And I would like to give the floor to her for the institutional greetings. So thank you, Assessora Cocco. Thank you very much for being here and to support this initiative. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. And I have particularly to thank the City's Resilience Department of the municipality and the World Meteorological Organization for being with us this morning. I am very pleased that this event is included in the STEM in the City month, which is the main activity that we are organizing to promote the value of digital culture in all areas. And especially we want to attract and engage girls into STEM studies. This initiative is also connected to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And for us, it's very important to share this idea with youth, because in their future, they will be going to work in any job they will go for the ultimate scope of sustainability. And this morning is very, very important, because thanks to Ms. Tarasova, we will know something more about how we can use meteorological data for sustainability. And this is an interesting point of view also for our youth, especially for girls, because I am sure that we need more and more girls in this kind of areas. A couple of data from our STEM in the City activity. This year, we overcome all the numbers than the previous edition. So we have more than 10,000 users on our platform and more than 30,000 visualization of all the events that are available on steminthecity.eu. This is something, because it means that youth are really interested in getting more and more information for this kind of topics. We are working with data at all levels in Municipality of Milan. I am Deputy Mayor for Digital Transformation, and I have based all my job on the collection of data, because data are very, very important for us to take the right decision. And so we have to share the culture of data with youth. We have to share the value of having objective information that we can use, that we can leverage to take our decision. So I don't want to get too much time. I'm really happy to be here with you today. So thank you very much, Lisa, Marina, and Oksana. And I will be with you until my next appointment. So I will be in the background, but I will be waiting for your next speeches.
Thank you, Assessora Cocco, and thank you again, even for mostly for giving us the opportunity to share with the broad public our work and our initiative. So thank you very much. And before moving on and leaving the floor to our speakers, I would like to say a few words about the context that give life to this event. The theme of the panel comes from the collaboration between the municipality of Milan and the World Meteorological Organization. And this collaboration is in the process of being formalized by a memorandum of intent, which ran as a pilot project for the implementation of the integrated hydrometeorological, climate and air quality services, as will be further explained and discussed by today's speakers. For those who may not know, the WMO is a specialized agency of the United Nations, which is dedicated to the international cooperation on the monitoring process of the Earth's atmosphere, and it also observes the interaction of the environment and human settlements. So today's speakers, Oksana Tarasova in representation of the WMO and Marina Trentin for the municipality of Milan, they will illustrate us how the collaboration between these two institutions can lead to the implementation of resilient policy and best practices within the context of the urban context of the city of Milan. And moreover, it will be shown how technology and data can be put at the service of institution and at the service of the environment. But I do not want to steal any more time from the speakers. So it is a great pleasure for me to welcome Dr. Oksana Tarasova, who is the head of the Atmospheric Environment Research Division within the Science and Innovation Department of the WMO. And Dr. Tarasova will introduce us to what the integrated urban services are. Sorry. Did you hear myself? I have with echo. Okay. So I was saying that Dr. Tarasova will introduce us to what are the integrated urban services and how the WMO's methodology for the integration services can help local climate adaptation plan and resilient strategies. So please, Dr. Tarasova, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much for invitation to this very important event. And we are very happy in WMO that Milan was the first city which actually consciously took a decision to participate in the implementation of integrated urban services. And we are looking very much to our collaboration on this topic and to the outcomes of this project. And before I start talking about the integrated urban services, I would like to thank our Ms. Coco for a beautiful introduction, and I cannot agree more with her concerning the need for the education and the need for engagement of girls in STEM, because the technology is our future, and this is where we can make a substantial change if we have appropriate education. And in World Meteorological Organization, we strive for gender equality, so there was a decision of the Congress to include the equal gender representation, especially in the bodies which are making decisions about the organization. And there was even the quota of 40%, which we have to strive for representation of the female in all WMO bodies. And we are working very strongly to promote the involvement of girls and women in meteorological sciences and physical sciences and earth system sciences, which are sometimes very difficult because the STEM is not a favorite topic. But I mean, there's a lot of the things which we can do if we improve the engagement of girls and women in those natural sciences and meteorological sciences. Let's move to the integrated urban services. And why do we look at the integrated urban services? We notice that there is a very rapid urbanization which is happening. And if in 2008 there was a 50% of the population which was living in urban settings, then this percentage will increase by 2050 to 66%. And we can see that urbanization happens very fast, and it does not concern only the mega cities. There is a large increase in the small and medium-sized cities and the large cities, and we see that about 90% of urban population increases in Africa and Asia. The issue with the urban domain and how the things are organized and happening on the urban scale is that you have a high concentration of the infrastructure in the population, and the set of the risks which are experienced by the cities is extremely high. Those risks are associated with their extreme weather events, with the flooding and ocean acidification, the changes in the ecosystem which are surrounding the cities and within the cities, the potential displacement of the population, which has to happen when you have the extreme events on the city scale, and the damage to the infrastructure and the city population when you have a different kind of the hazards. And the point is that when you are in the urban setting, the domino effect happens. For example, the failure in one piece of infrastructure causes the domino failure of the other pieces of infrastructure. So you can see on the slide that if there is a typhoon or whatever extreme event is happening, you have associated strong winds, the storm surge. If you're in the coastal city, you have high waves, you have heavy rain, which is happening. And that creates problems, for example, for the building construction. If you have these strong winds, it also impacts your traffic, or if you have the severe rain, it creates inundation and impacts your drainage system and water availability. And that can cause a failure along the line. So then we talk about the urban resilience. We need to understand this domino effect, and we need to realize that what we need to provide should be the multi-hazard early warning system on the shorter time scale, but also that should imply the information for the long-term planning. So we need to have a continuum from the short-term forecasting and multi-hazard early warning system for weather, hydrology, air quality, and the long-term planning. Because if you have to live in the city where you will experience the climate change, which will be exacerbated, you need to have the appropriate materials used for construction, used for the roads, the appropriate infrastructure for distribution of water, and controlling the temperature of the city. So when we talk about the integrated urban services, we refer to the weather, climate, hydrological, and air quality services, which are composed of the data observation and prediction that may support the traditional urban services, which is transport, education, health system, and so on and so forth. So these integrated urban services may be provided directly by the national meteorological and hydrological services if they work on the city scale, or in cooperation with the other stakeholders and partners are in the private and public agencies. If we look at what are the types of the hazards which are experienced by the cities, we performed the survey of the WMO members, and we noticed that the most frequent hazards which are met by the city are associated, as you can see, with heavy rain, flooding, thunderstorms, windstorms, heat waves, air pollution, fog, and so on and so forth. And the percentage of the responses, because we asked the member countries and their national net services, and we ask the cities as well, the distribution of the hazards, which is responded by the cities and by the national governments, it's actually quite similar. We can see that hydrometeorological hazards are the most frequent in the cities. And what happens at this point is that we know that quite a lot of cities do provide those services. They do provide the weather forecast. They do provide for example, the hydrological forecast and the national hydrometeorological services. They do have a system in place to address some environmental risks. But what happens at this point is that those services are provided independently. So you may have somebody providing a water service and somebody providing the meteorological forecast. But you realize that if you have a heavy rainfall, that it connects with the hydrological services and the water availability as well. But those services are currently provided independently in many places. So there is a value in looking at the integration of those services. And that's the reason why we developed a methodology to look at the integrated urban services, trying to combine the weather forecasts, the climate forecast, the hydrological forecast, and air quality forecast. So when the stakeholders have to take the decision about the city, they have a comprehensive picture of what is going on and take the decisions which are consistent between different domains. How the integration can happen? It may happen at the level of the observational infrastructure. So that you have the shared infrastructure, that the measurements of air quality, the measurements of temperature, the measurements of precipitation, the measurements of water position are happening at the same places. So you have the integrated observing system. If those systems are already built and they are built independently, you can benefit from integration when you have the exchange of the data between the different domains. So the meteorological data are provided for air quality forecasting. Air quality forecasting is provided for climate projections, and the weather and hydrological forecasting also exchange the data. So that is integration at the level of the data. And that there are technologies which are now in place that allow this fast exchange of data between different domains. Or you can go the step further and you can develop the models, which will actually include all components in one model. And through integrated models, you will be able to address different elements from weather, climate, hydrology, and air quality in one package. And of course, then you, from those integrations, you go to applications and decision-making and communication and outreach, and applications can be tailored depending on the sector which you try to address. The benefits. Why should we integrate and why shouldn't we continue doing business as usual? Well, the urban setting actually, as I explained, causes a domino effect. So you need to look at the multi-hazard early warning systems at the same time, and the integrated services allow you to do so. The urban planning needs the long-term information for the urban planning. So if you do the integrated services, you have a consistency between what happens now and how you have to adopt in the future. It also helps you to increase your capacity and capabilities through the cross-cutting services. It also increases the efficiency of the infrastructure when you share the same infrastructure. It increases the consistency between different pieces of information because they are done on the integrated manner between the scales and domains. And you have also effective services through the partnership, and you have the effective risk communication. So there are multiple benefits why we need to do the integrated urban services. And we try to do an assessment, where are we now? How many cities are implementing those integrated urban services? So we've done the assessment of some demonstration cities. So we send a call to our member countries asking if they have cities that implement integrated urban services. And you can see that there are two scales how you can do the integration. You can do the integration across the service provision, so that weather, climate, air quality, and hydrology are packaged in one package, or you can do the integration across the sector, which means that meteorological information, for example, is provided to the multiple sectors. The more, the better. And you can see that, of course, the best is to be in this corner, but there's still some cities like Toronto or Toulouse or Seattle or Amsterdam, which do have integration, but it doesn't happen across all the components or across all the sectors. So we are really keen to see how such integration can be done in Milan, and we would like to see Milan in this corner, where we have a cross-sector and cross-service integration. And of course, when you speak about the integration, you need to understand for whom do you do it. It's not the abstract exercise. Any kind of a services is driven by the users who would use this information. And when we speak about the integrated urban services, the stakeholders in the user community happens on a local scale, like city government, who runs different urban services on the transport environment, are the local civil societies, the advocate groups, and even the private sector, which operates in the city and which needs the information. This may happen on a national level as well, where you need to understand how these services would be beneficial for, let's say, the bigger domains, and also at an international level, when you establish a connection with international organizations like WMO or World Health Organization or the other research networks. So to understand the needs for integrated urban services, we initiated the user mapping survey, which was launched just a week ago. And through this survey, we try to understand and map the users and the stakeholders of integrated urban services who could actually benefit from that. I will just give you two examples of the integrated urban services and how they are implemented. One example is coming from the French cities, where they looked at the impact of the urban heat island. An urban heat island is associated with the fact that within the cities, because of the buildings and roads and the concrete stuff, you have the temperature which can be 10 degrees warmer within the city than in the surrounding areas. There is just one map example of one night in Toulouse where you see the difference of 6 degrees between the city center and surrounding. And those heat island effects will be actually exacerbated when we move to the warmer temperatures under the climate change. And this is just a rather complicated diagram which shows that the climate change is considered as a driver for urban planning, and it also impacts the urban planning and how you do the vegetated areas, what is the water resource availability, and how you can actually, through urban planning, to avoid the exacerbated heat island effect. And the calculations which were done, for example, for Paris, demonstrated that by 2100, most of the city will absolutely require air conditioning. And I think this is also the case of Milan, because it's in quite a warm climate. So the air conditioning will be required, but the air conditioning increases the heat outside. So when you increase the heat outside, you would need even more cooling. So you kind of close the loop. And when you have to increase the cooling inside the building, then the people who cannot afford the air conditioning, they will be suffering the most. So there are different solutions, and Paris in particular is looking at the different solutions, how to actually get out of this closed loop, and looking at the potential heat wave and emergency practices, like using the information, detailed information about the distribution of the temperature and wind speed in the city to do the watering of the roads to avoid the extreme heat. They do the building renovation, they do the urban vegetation, again, looking at the potential future water availability in the city. So again, you can see that you need temperature and water availability in integrated manner, and they do the urban planning that helps to avoid a future exacerbation of those heat islands. The similar example of the integrated urban services is done in Hong Kong, where they look at a continuum between the weather forecasting and the climate forecasting, and they use it for the different applications and the different sectors. And when they talk about the short-term forecasting, it's the days are from hours to days, and then they have the extended forecasting up to annual, and then they do the climate projection. And this is all done through the same model, so it is consistent between different scales. Where do they provide their services? They provide a short-term services, for example, for the energy utilities, where they can understand what is the demand for the energy. If you have a heat wave, you may have a higher consumption, or if you have the extreme cold, you may have a higher consumption. But also on the longer term, how much sunshine would be available for the production of the renewable energy. So they do the same for the public health sector on the potential connection between the heat stress and current exposure and weather impacts on elderly and thermal comfort, to what are the potential future applications for the health sector. They do the same for the water availability. They do the same, again, the short-term and the longer-term planning for the urban and building constructions, and they even provide the advice to the agricultural communities, like to the agricultural and fishery department, the flower farmers, and also looking at how the impact of the current state of climate or the current meteorological condition have an impact on agricultural stuff, and how does it happen in the future. So I would like to conclude that these cities are, as we know, they are focused areas of population waste generation, environmental degradation, and a lot of risks because of the dense infrastructure and dense population. The integrated urban services are needed to integrate existing environmental services to cope with the challenges faced in the cities. And as I explained, the benefits of integrating are often very, very obvious when you do the consistency between the scales and between the sectors. The integration will require engagement of the urban stakeholders and building the capacity to provide those services which are needed. WMO is providing the guidance for national meteorological and hydrological services to develop appropriate urban services that build on the experience of demonstration cities. And again, I wanted to reiterate, sometimes the national meteorological and hydrological services do not work on urban scale. So the development of such services will require a very, very different partnership for the individual cities. And the integrated urban services would include a combination of dense observational network, high-resolution forecast, and multi-hazard early warning system, as well as climate services. So they have a whole package at the same time. And those services should meet the special needs of cities as expressed by urban stakeholders and assist cities in setting and improving mitigation and adaptation strategies so that they can be resilient and very sustainable. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope that we are all on the same page, and we are very excited and enthusiastic to see Milan as the pilot of implementation of those integrated urban services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tarasova, for your presentation and for giving us an insight of what and how the access to data represent now more than ever a real possibility for public authorities to develop and implement an evidence-based policymaking and a disaster risk management and communication. So thank you also because you showed us how data will help local authorities and to adapt and to adopt a development strategy that take into account climate and climatic and environmental conditions. So thank you very much for that. And now I am really happy to welcome Dr. Marina Trentin, which is the project manager of our Resilient City department, and she will show us what are the needs of the city of Milan in order to develop an effective adaptation and resilience strategy. And she will also illustrate us how WMO's data could be useful in supporting resilient policies. Thank you, Marina. I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much, Lisa, and really thanks a lot, Oksana, for this very wide travel across data and across any kind of services that cities and urban areas can use in order to plan and in order to try to decrease the risks and the threats in which the climate change is going to create, by which climate change is going to create a lot of great problems. As I already said, I'm really, really happy to be here, and I'm really, really happy to can share this experience, because data and the occasion, the opportunity of having forecasting of what's happening from a climate point of view is a real untold dream of every environmental scientist. And this is also a great occasion because being now talking about this kind of issues in Milan, which is a real laboratory, a sort of open sky laboratory for integrated services and for experimenting resilience practices and resilience policies, is really amazing now. It's something that is really giving a lot of energy to the city and a lot of energy to all the teams who are working on this kind of issues. So this is why it is really important to be here and to talk about the engagement of girls and women, but not just them, in all the STEM sciences, just because all the STEM matters, just because to work in environmental matters and work in resilience matters means understanding an integrated point of view. This is what Oksana really said clearly. You have to work with the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary environment. And this approach requires that all the roles have to be recognized and have to be assumed by everyone. So not just deciding or not recognizing some kind of roles. This is why multidisciplinary approach and multidisciplinary teams need to have STEM competencies and need that all of genders be recognized inside them. And this is something I really believe and in which I really believe. And it makes really the difference in what happens in policies and what really impacts policies and actions in cities. Now I will, share my screen. Sorry, I had a little problem with my laptop. So as I was already introduced, I work in the Environmental Transition Department for the Resilient City Office. And which kind of issues are we involved in? Mostly we work on what makes a city resilient. So we try to make function everything that is involved in environmental and energy policies, everything that is involved in sustainability, and everything is involved or related to not just environmental protection, but also environment management and environment pollution. This is because Milan is what we call a city in transition, is a city that has a great urbanization rate and see its soil sealing, for example, and that means that a lot of buildings and a lot of sealed soil creates, for example, large area of impermeabilization, so that water doesn't just flow away but stays there and creates a lot of problems for goods and assets in the city, for example. It means that you have a lot of heat that accumulates because of buildings and because of all this built environment. And this also means that you have what we call the wicked problems. You have problems that affect all the citizens and the goods that are inside the city, and threat the life quality of everyone. That's why you need to address complex problems with complex solutions. And usually complex solutions are really simple. They must be innovative, and they must be able to tackle a lot of problems in the same moment with the same kind of action. In the case of Milan, the climate change crosses this kind of urbanization and creates some threats that are mainly related to the increase of temperatures, so to the increase of the frequency of heat waves, of droughts, and most of all, the creation inside the city of really what we call them hot heat islands that create, for example, a lot of problems for people who has to cool houses and cool rooms, or problems to people who have no access to cooling situations or to cooling instruments. And that means that also health can be threatened by this kind of problem. At the same time, you have an increase in the frequency of the extreme weather events. For example, you have an increase of heavy rainfall, and sometimes you have them very concentrated in a very, very small period or small time. And that means that you have to deal with the flash floods, and you have to deal with floods and problems with water just coming out of the channels or the rivers who cross the city. And then you have air pollution, of course, because this is really maybe the main problem that is widely known all around the world. So we created a local climate profile for the city of Milan in order to try and plan our adaptation measures and an adaptation plan. This means that we need data, and we need scenarios and of course forecasting in order to make decision, in order to understand which are the best tools we can use, and in order to better understand how to deploy policies in order to protect citizens, to protect Milan's assets, to protect citizens' goods, to protect the private sector and the public sector. Mostly, we have to understand that the more sensitive targets are also the people who are ill, for example, the oldest or the youngest. So the most sensitive targets are usually also the targets among the citizens who cannot defend themselves or who have less access to any kind of protection. That's why we have to understand where we have the highest risk, where we have the highest vulnerability among goods and among citizens, and then we have to understand how we can protect them and how we can cross this kind of knowledge of our city. For example, we have to know where the vulnerability, the citizen vulnerability is more concentrated, where the heat is more. The heat islands are more relevant, and then we cross them in order to understand which are the areas in the city in which we must act before, for example, with a higher priority. So understanding which is the socio-economic vulnerability of our territory and understanding which is the climate risk and which are the climate threats affecting our territory is really important for us. And that's why it is really important to create these partnerships with the organization like the WMO in order to better manage the policies and better manage what the actions we can deploy for protecting our citizens and protecting our city. For example, this is another kind of vulnerability and risk analysis. This is what we did for the urban runoff. That's because, for example, when you have heavy rains, water tends to accumulate because of the sealed soil, and you have to understand where the risk is higher and where you have to be ready to act in order to answer to the emergency. So this collaboration with WMO means that Milan can be again something more in some way. We can enhance our way of being an open laboratory for better understanding and better deploying policies for adaptation and resilience. For example, this data and the services that will be gained thanks to the data and thanks to the forecasting coming from this collaboration with WMO can be addressed to mitigate and manage all the climate threats and then, as we said, to reduce the vulnerability and increase our resilience and our planning of resilience. And most of all, this can help us to monitor what's happening, because we say something, we must demonstrate what we are saying. And without data and without numbers, we cannot say this is happening, this is really happening. So this is just a really brief understanding of which kind of indicators we can use for measuring and monitoring what's happening when you apply policies, when you deploy tools and you try to develop plans. For example, we are just working on this air and climate plan. This is our adaptation plan in some way, and has some adaptation actions. So, for example, there is a resilient emergency management tool. So we need to understand where are the threats, when they're coming, and we need to be prepared in order to better manage them, in order to better protect citizens, in order to better protect the city asset. For example, long-term weather forecasting, or for example, a better understanding on where the heat waves will affect more the city, can support us in telling the more sensitive citizen where they can go and find a cool place in order to be safe from an health point of view. Or, for example, again, it is important for us to monitor our local variability of climate. For example, understanding when and where the wind will be much stronger, or when and where, for example, we could have a high intensity of rains and or snows, for example, or understanding better where and when air pollutants will concentrate or will affect more the most sensitive targets. So in this case, what we are working is a more attent way to define the resilience towards heat island phenomenon, for example, by detecting thermal anomalies, by detecting heat island effect, by providing a forecast of when and where they will be, and for example, understanding which is the distribution of the humidity of the air, in order to better understand the thermal well-being of people who will live outside in non-cooling place, and for example, to better understand which is the distribution of temperature at different altitudes. For example, in this case, to better understand the canyon effect inside among the buildings, because the buildings can create a sort of chimney effect for heat, and then can worsen the effect of this. Then you can also try to forecast what's happening about flash floods and about floods, because we have a lot of channels. We are a water city, and we need to manage all the risks and all the threats that come from being a floating city, because we have a lot of water under the city, and we have a lot of water that is on the city. Understanding how much water we will have to manage, and how much storage we have to prepare in advance, or how much sealed ground we need to deseal in order to better the infiltration of water, for example, through MBS, or for example, through just creation of green roofs or other kind of natural-based solutions for water management, in order to prevent problems coming from that. So that's why this partnership for us is really important. It's really important for risk communication. So it's really important for the prevention of the threats and the prevention of the problems that can affect the city. And it is really important for this thing that is very difficult to do, that is the long time planning, and that is basic for a city and for the resilience of the city. So that's why we really are happy and thanks this collaboration that is coming with WMO.
Thank you, Marina, for your presentation and for explaining us so clearly how the municipality of Milan can benefit from this collaboration. So I see that there are no questions from the audience, and Assessora Cocco had to leave for another meeting, but she thanks you, Oksana, for the presentation, which was very effective and interesting. And she also wishes that the collaboration between the WMO and Milan will be fruitful and give life to future collaborations. So I want to conclude again, if there are no other questions or comments from you, I want to conclude thanking again you two, so the speakers, for the brilliant presentations, and I also want to thank those who followed the event.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.